Today I'm going to attempt to answer a question that I've been wondering about for quite some time. Can you actually just talk your way through Fallout New Vegas? I mean, yeah, sure, the speech mechanic adds a wide variety of options for you while questing, but can you solely rely on it? So the rules for this challenge are fairly simple. Rule 1 is that I can only use the speech and barter skills. So this logically follows that Rule 2 means that I am not allowed to use any other skills such as guns, medicine, science, lockpicking, stealth. This also means that unfortunately I won't be able to heal, as eating and drinking is governed by survival and medpacks are governed by medicine. And finally, Rule 3, no companions whatsoever. This is to ensure that I don't gain a companion who ends up killing someone. That just would not be in the spirit of the challenge. So is everyone clear and happy with the rules? No? Great, let's get started. So my story begins waking up in a doctor's office, dazed and confused. Doc Mitchell just treated me for a gunshot wound to the head and I somehow survived. I also assume that he's moonlighting as a magician, as he just pulled out a Robcore reflection module from thin air. For my special stats, I drained my strength and perception and put the points into endurance, charisma and intelligence. I kept my agility at 5 and put my luck down to 3. As speech and barter are the only skills I'm going to be using, I picked them as my tag skills, and for my last one I just dumped it into energy weapons. I picked good nature as one of my traits, increasing my speech and barter. I also took Wild Wasteland because I never do, and I think there's some interesting dialogue options. After Doc Mitchell releases me and gives me back all of my possessions, I now have a wide array of things that I can sell. So I pay a visit to Chet at the general goods store and start selling him all the equipment that I can. So normally one of the first quests that you can do is a tutorial with Sunny Smiles. After that you can do the Ghost Town gunfight quest. Rather disappointingly, however, I can't do either of these because Sunny will require me to use a varmint rifle, which I'm not allowed to use, and Trudy won't appear until after I do this quest. I did try to get into the gas station at the top of Goodsprings in the hope that this would start the quest, but unfortunately it didn't. I can't get in, which means Goodsprings is going to have to look after itself. However, while speaking to Sunny Smiles earlier, she did inform me that I should be heading towards Prim. It's very easy to avoid combat here, as you're just met with radroaches and geckos. I had to be very careful on my way into Prim as there's mines on the ground, and I can't disarm them because that would involve using my explosive skill. Another thing I'm going to have to worry about is healing. I have to be very careful about conserving HP, as I'll only have a few limited chances to sleep in a bed and heal throughout the run. The raiders outside the Vicky and Vance got me down to about half HP before I was able to make it inside and speak to Johnson Nash. He also buys things, so this was good. Johnson informed me that some raiders had Deputy Beagle hostage. I would have to go and rescue him in order to get some information from him. Now, I did make it into the Steve Bison Hotel, but I was immediately shot to pieces. I did have another attempt, but it went exactly the same way. And so I realised the only way to do this was to have full health. I ran back to the NCR tent just outside of Prim and rested to heal up. I then once again carefully made my way across the bridge into Prim and around the buildings, avoiding all the raiders outside, making it safely back into the Steve Bison. Now I realise this does feel a lot like a can you beat Fallout New Vegas without killing anything run, and I suppose it kind of is. There may be situations later on where I use my speech skill to get someone killed, but we'll come to that. I managed to reach Deputy Beagle and for the first time in this challenge, passed a speech check, convincing him to tell me where Benny went. I also used my speech skill to tell him that if he tried running away instead of fighting by my side, I would kill him myself. I then proceeded to leave him to die. I was kind of hoping that he would make it out of there alive because I was planning on using him for something else later. Unfortunately, I died before that. However, it did actually work this time and I managed to get out of there alive. I dragged my sorry corpse back to the tent to rest and heal up again. I headed back into Prim expecting to deal with more raiders, only there wasn't any. And as a bonus, Deputy Beagle somehow survived. I spoke to him about bringing law and order back to Prim, which I didn't really need to do, but I wanted the experience. And so I headed off towards the NCR outpost in the hope that they would bring some law and order. I did get shot by some raiders along the way, but made it to the outpost with about half health. I used my barter skill to convince Major Knight that having Prim as a trading route would be good for the West. And by doing so, this granted me enough experience to level up, so everyone wins. I poured all of my points into speech, and then I had a decision to make. I could pick Confirmed Bachelor and Lady Killer as they do offer interesting dialogue options. However, for now I just want experience, so I would have to go with Swift Learner. So, once I'd rested and recovered, I headed across the dry lake, somehow making it into the back of Nipton, which avoided any raiders along the way. I spoke to Vulpes, who told me to spread word of the Legion's atrocities, which I gladly did. This allowed me enough experience to level up again. I poured all of my points into speech before heading off towards Novak. Now, the road to Novak is quite dangerous, as there's quite a lot of raiders around. However, I was able to run past them relatively easily. I also met some travelling merchants along the way where I could offload some of the junk that I had. I was literally still trying to sell the equipment I was given at the start of the game, because a lot of merchants don't have enough caps. I did, however, get absolutely destroyed by a group of raiders while I was on my road to Novak. Thankfully I save often, and so after reloading I just kinda went a different route round. It seemed to work. Upon entering Novak, I headed straight for Manny's room hoping to find him, but he wasn't there, so I used his bed to sleep and recover. I then went to the dinosaur shop and sold more of the equipment that I had, before heading up to speak to Manny. Now, I don't know why, but I had this idea that you could just convince him to tell you where Benny went, but you can't. It's not even an option. It's also worth mentioning that I don't have to do the Come Fly With Me quest, but I desperately need experience. So Manny wants me to clear out all the ghouls from the Repcon Center. Now, doing this without firing a single bullet is going to be challenging because I'm going to have constant ghoul attacks. Making it past the ghouls and inside the Repcon Center isn't really too challenging. However, once I met Jason Bright, the ghouls were still following me, and guess who he sided with? Well, after this zombie had shown me his true colours, I really didn't want to help him, but I didn't have a choice. Reloading the autosave from when I first entered, the ghouls were no longer following me, so I was able to actually have a conversation with Jason. So not to mince my words here, this guy is a cult leader, and he wants to take all of his followers off in a rocket to the Promised Land. First, however, he wants me to get rid of some demons for him. These turned out to be Nightkin that are down in the basement. They're actually quite friendly once you get to know them. The Nightkin wanted me to get information on the Stealth Boy shipment that should have been here, except I couldn't get to it because there was a ghoul up there called Harland who wanted me to find his dead friend. Remember guys, helping is quicksand. I did manage to get by the Nightkin, although I took significant damage doing so. I found Harland's dead friend, then convinced him to leave so that I could find the Stealth Boy shipments. I then convinced Davison to leave, which would in turn grant the ghouls access to the lower tunnels. Oh, look at that, he's trying to kill me again, even when I'm helping him. So it seems that he will always attack you while you are being chased by ghouls. However, now he has all of his ghouls in the rocket area, so that will no longer be a problem. It seems they need igniting agent and some kind of module in order to get these rockets into the air. I managed to convince old lady Gibson to sell me the thruster modules at half price. I then sent all of the ghoulies into space, which gave me enough experience to level up. I distributed my points between speech and barter and took the Confirmed Bachelor perk because I wanted some interesting dialogue. Finally, I made it back to Manny and told him the ghoul problem had been dealt with. He told me to go to Boulder City. I spoke with Lieutenant Monroe outside of Boulder City and convinced him to let me go speak to the Great Khans. I spoke with Jessup, which gave me enough experience to level up. Not once, but twice. The first time I leveled up, I put my points into barter, taking my speech up to 85. The second time I leveled up, I maxed out my speech skill. I also took the Lady Killer perk, hoping for some interesting dialogue. I then convinced Jessup to let the hostages go free, and convinced Lieutenant Monroe to let the Great Khans go free. Jessup told me to head to New Vegas to find Benny, and I got attacked by some wild dogs along the way. However, I managed to outrun them and make it to the Gunrunners, where I began to sell more of the junk that I had. Making it to the gates of New Vegas, I passed a credit check, headed inside, and met Mr. House. He wanted his platinum chip, so I would have to go and see Benny. But first I headed up to my new penthouse suite and rested. I found a snazzy suit and a cool hat inside of one of the wardrobes. They do offer speech bonuses, but I don't need them. I just want to look cool. So it's at this point that I really truly found out how much of a poison snake Benny actually is. You see, you can actually convince him to come up to his penthouse with you, and then he'll kind of talk to you about joining him or something. Now, I have done this in the past, and I'm pretty sure he just splits town straight away. However, this time for some reason he didn't. Instead, his guards came up to kill me. I tried this a few times, but all had the same result. So I reloaded, this time using my barter skill and convincing him that I would meet him up in his penthouse. Now, this is so that he can set you up for an ambush. Then, speaking to him over the intercom, I can actually convince him to let me live, telling him that I'm just trying to fulfill my contract as a courier. After convincing him to let me live, I leveled up again, where I put all of my points into barter, before meeting Yes Man. This gave me enough experience to level up again. I once again put all of my points into barter. This time I took the Terrifying Presence perk as it offers unique dialogue. So, speaking to Yes Man, we began to formulate a plan to take over New Vegas, but first I would have to deal with the major tribes in the area. I started with the boomers. It's pretty difficult to avoid taking damage here. I mainly just hug the left hand wall and hope for the best until I make it to the gate. I think I had about 1 HP left by the time I got there. After speaking to the boomers through the fence, I spoke to Pearl and then fast travelled to Goodsprings, where I had Doc Mitchell patch me up. Since I was at Goodsprings, this seemed like a good time to head towards Red Rock Canyon. I don't actually need to do anything with these factions, I just have to speak to them. However, this would involve getting through Cazador Canyon. A few hits from the Cazadors and I would die very quickly. There would be nothing stopping it. However, I managed to hug the mountains and avoid most of them. On my way out of the canyons, I got hit a few times, but I managed to survive. Once I reached Red Rock Canyon, my next target was the Hidden Valley. Now, normally the best thing to do is use Veronica. Unfortunately, if I do this, she will kill some red scorpions that are outside and I will fail my challenge. So I have to go without her. So I had to comply with the Brotherhood of Steel. They took all of my possessions and put a bomb collar on me. They then sent me off to deal with an NCR ranger that was located in a bunker next door. I wasn't really sure how to deal with this because I've never dealt with it, but it turns out you can actually convince him to leave the bunker, so I dealt with this peacefully. Returning to the Brotherhood of Steel, they took the bomb collar off me and I got all of my possessions back. I then fast travelled to New Vegas where I spoke to the Omertas and the White Gloves. This bit was actually really trippy for me because even though I'm not playing the game audio, there was no game audio here. And so it comes to no surprise that the game crashed straight away after this conversation. I reported back to Yes Man and told him that I'd now met all of the tribes. The time had come to dethrone Mr. House. First, however, I would have to get the Platinum Chip back, so it was off to Cottonwood Cove. I actually met some NCR Rangers along the way and finally used my Terrifying Presence perk to see what that would do. Kinda just made them cower, which I didn't really need to do anyway, but never mind. I jumped into the river and swam towards Cottonwood Cove as it seemed like the safest option. However, I was being attacked by swamp monsters. Well, I would have been, but they couldn't quite catch me. After I spoke to Caesar, he gave me the Platinum Chip and sent me into the Lucky 38 bunker in order to blow up whatever was inside. Mr. House seemed relatively surprised that I was there already, because I forgot to go and tell him that Benny escaped. Heading down into the bunker to upgrade the Securitron army, I came across a very serious problem. You see, I was getting torn to shreds by the lasers. I was actually able to survive long enough to make it to the room with the terminal to upgrade the Securitrons. However, I couldn't get out again because I was just getting destroyed. So I would have to leave Cottonwood Cove and fast travel to the Gunrunners where I bought a Mark II combat armor and combat helmet. Returning to the bunker with better armor yielded much better results, and I was actually able to make it to the terminal, upgrade the Securitron army, and get out of there with only about half health. This gave me enough experience to level up, so I just maxed out my barter skill and just started pouring the rest of the points into energy weapons. I spoke to Caesar, who sent me on my merry way, but not before having Benny crucified. See, I told you I'd have somebody killed eventually. I returned back to my penthouse to rest and recover before using the Platinum Chip to make it into Mr. House's secret bunker and disconnected him from Cerebral. This allowed me to level up again, however I'd already maxed out what I needed, so I just put everything into energy weapons and took the toughness perk. I then installed Yes Man onto Mr. House's computer, diverted the power from the Eldorado substation, and was ready to begin the battle for Hoover Dam. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I just totally ignored the President Kimball thing. So one thing we've all come to expect from Fallout New Vegas, and to some point cherish at this point, is that eventually the game will crash. Yes, I was halfway through the battle for Hoover Dam when the game crashed. Fallout New Vegas, I love you. Do not ever change. So, due to siding with Yes Man, I'm up against the Legion. Now, I do have Securitrons with me, and I believe the NCR are around somewhere, and due to this, the Legion seem a lot more preoccupied with them than they are with me. This gives me pretty much free reign to do whatever I want. I convinced the NCR guards to take a hike so that I could redivert power to the fort, activating my Securitron army. This allowed me to level up again, but who really cares at this point? I flicked a switch and turned on my army of death machines that rained hell down on the Legion. There's now nothing stopping me from Legate Lanius. Furthermore, heading into the Legate's camp, I pretty much have full health, so that's really gonna help. So I'm at the final push now. All I have to do is reach Legate Lanius and use my speech and barter skills to convince him to leave peacefully. Now, in order to do this, you do have to have a speech skill of 100, but it is possible to do this without fighting him. And with that, I was actually able to convince Legate Lanius to leave. And for the second time, proving this isn't just a pacifist run, had Yes Man throw General Lee Oliver over Hoover Dam, proving that yes, you can in fact just talk your way through Fallout New Vegas. Okay, so now I'm wondering, is this possible with Fallout 3? I really don't think it is. They are similar games in a lot of ways, but also very different. Anyway, to the three of you still watching, I'd just like to say a huge thank you. Please like, subscribe and all that good stuff. Leave any comments if you do have any. And I will see you guys next time. Take care.